Hey, Chris Manning here from the Locked On Cavs podcast, joined today by very special guest Richard Stayman at Mavs Draft on Twitter from the Locked On NBA Draft podcast to talk in the first segment about what it means for the Cavs to probably, in all likelihood, picking 14th in segment 1, talking about Wisconsin's Johnny Davis in segment 2, and Kansas's Ochai Agbaji in segment 3. Let's get into it. All right, the music you heard on the way in, at least in audio form only right now, is from Astro Radio. Check them out on Apple Music or Spotify if you're into some good music. Thanks again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. Remember, we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Chris Manning, cover the Cavs and the NBA for places like Diamond, UPROXX, and SB Nations for the Sword. Our guest today, as mentioned at the top, is Richard Stayman, Mavs Draft winner and one of the Locked On NBA Draft experts over in the Locked On NBA Draft feed. Richard, what's up, man? Thanks for coming through.
Hey, I'm happy to be back. I know we had a good run. Was it last year? I've lost track of time. So
time since since like March of 2022 is fake. So that is understandable that we have forgotten how long it has been.
Yeah, I'm excited to be back though. I think the Cavs are in a really good position long term. So interested to see how they add on this year in the draft.
Yeah, so let's start with that. So they're probably going to be picking 14th unless the Tankathon gods bestow them a top 3 pick and they can do something, whatever they do, that whether that's picking someone or whether that's trading that for a more established player, they're probably going to be picking 14th. They obviously tried to, this was a pick that if they would have made the playoffs, they wouldn't have had. So there is, even if it makes trading future picks a little more complicated for Kobe Alman and his staff, there probably is some benefit to them getting a pick. But Richard, when we look at this draft, when we look at what picking 14th means in this class, what do you think that offers Cleveland if they're looking to add something right now?
Yeah, you look at some of the years it passed, really just like the last 5 years, and 14 to 16, really 13 to 16, you get a lot of good value in terms of just guys who probably should go top 10 every year. There's a guy who slips. Just some recent names: Michael Porter Jr. went 14th in 2018. Tyler Hero went 13th in 2019. In 2020, wasn't as strong, but Cole Anthony was somebody I had really high. He went 15th. So right in that range. And then last year, Moses Moody was a guy who I thought was for sure top 10 pick. And all of those guys, I mean, you could make the argument at a very good case for top 10. So you're getting value of teams are probably going to reach at some point in the first 13 picks, and someone like the Cavs would definitely benefit.
So when you look at the quality of this class, I think everyone knows the top 3, probably the top 4, maybe 5 or 6, depending on where Shaedon Sharpe sort of ends up in this class as well. But when you look at that range, whether it's like outside of the 6 to like 14, 15, 16, in that range roughly, maybe it's sitting out to 20, depending on how you feel about tiers, is the talent pool where the Cavs are going to be picking from in all likelihood? Is there intrigue in having this pick in this class if you're them trying to add on to Darius Garland, Evan Mobley, Jared Allen, and the rest of what they're going to be building with?
Yeah, I think my board stops around 15. Is the last of really like the quality lottery tier or lottery, I would say, eligible on my board, where I would be like, all right, I take them in the lottery and I don't have a lot of concerns. After that, it really does drop off. So in recent years, for reference, I usually go about 20 on that. This year, it's about 5 short. So the depth in the middle is lacking. And obviously the star power at the top is lacking, but it's a deep class overall. I think for the Cavs, they can find somebody who is a specialist in that range. I mean, obviously, a couple of the guys that we're going to be talking about today qualify very much for that role. But I think that they're in a good spot where they can either gamble too with best player available and just go for an upside play, or just get a role player who fits the current timeline.
So here are I went onto MavsDraft.com. You're saying and if there's anything that has changed, you can tell the listeners and the viewers. Here's what we have right now, I'm going to go 2 through 19, because there's a name at 19 that I know the Cavs have scouted, and I think he'll be in play, even if it's maybe a little lower on some people's boards. So 10, Nikola Jovic, the international forward, Jalen Duren, the center at 11, Ochai Agbaji, who we're going to talk about later, Kendall Brown, Ty Washington, Johnny Davis, Jaden Hardy, Ismail Kamate, who I have not seen that name before, so I mispronounced it. I apologize. Ryan Rollins from Toledo, and Malachi Branham at 19, the guard from Ohio State, with Dyson Daniels at 20. There's some names in there that when I have started to do my cursory dive into this and look at this and think about, okay, what can the Cavs add? What are some of the things they can consider? Think about what they need in terms of probably help to take a next step next year, but also kind of build out build out with the talent pool they have. There's a lot of names in that range that I like in just the cursory knowledge of it. And yes, there's some centers in there. I don't think they should use a top 14 pick on a center. That would be a little bit crazy to me, but there's a lot of guards and wings that I think are kind of interest to me. And we're going to talk about two of them later today.
Yeah, I don't think there's really, if you're trying to pick a center, the Cavs are in a good position that they've gotten their front court for the most part out of the way. And it also helps that they've hit on every draft since 2018. I mean, their quote unquote worst pick might be Colin Sexton. And even to him, he's a great pick. So the Cavs are almost playing with house money here. And you could go so many different directions, and they really don't need to go for a big at all. And I don't really think there's any more than two bigs probably in the lottery that really are worth taking. I mean, it's Chet and Duren for me. So I think the Cavs are in a beautiful spot.
If you're looking at someone that maybe could slip for whatever reason out of that top, outside of that top 10, if someone does get pushed out for whatever reason, is there anyone that stands out to you as someone that if the Cavs could cross their fingers and say, okay, if this guy falls in our lap, or maybe if we go from 14 to 12, use one of our second round picks to move up or something, is there a name that if that guy falls that you kind of feel like they should make a move to go get that player if they do end up slipping a little bit?
Yeah, there's two guys that come to mind for this. One is somebody who absolutely this shouldn't happen, but you never know with injury, and that's AJ Griffin from Duke. I think if he had come into the season healthy, he had a knee injury in high school. If he had come into the season healthy, I think he would be more widely regarded as a top 5 prospect. His archetype is just ridiculous, 6'7" or so, really athletic, long, really NBA ready already, strong defender, can shoot the lights out, and should be able to develop on-ball skill. If the medical records don't check out, kind of like Michael Porter Jr. in 2018, literally also at the 14 spot, he could be someone that he falls into their lap. And then the other is Tari Eason. Tari Eason, somebody from LSU who I haven't seen. I don't think there's a concrete range for him. I've seen him as high as 8. I've also seen him outside of the lottery. So I don't know what his actual range is, but you look at a Patrick Williams type, and that's what you get with Tari Eason.
That's an intriguing. The name that if I'm Cleveland, and when I first reached out to you about draft stuff, the name that I'm like, if I'm Cleveland, and I don't suspect he'll fall, he's number 5 on your board. That's Benedict Mathurin. He's the guy that if he fell to like 8, I'd be like blowing up phones and being like, can we please go get this guy who would fit us perfectly in a lot of ways? But like Eason, like if you're talking about you get a Patrick Williams type defender, that mold of that 4 that, I mean, we've seen in the Boston series how valuable like Grant Williams has been. And the idea of Patrick Williams obviously is so intriguing for Chicago. Like that's a skill set that I think if you look at Cleveland's roster as a way to support Evan Mobley, maybe unlock him at the 5 a little bit as he gets bigger, that's a skill set they absolutely could use. And like, I think that's sort of the beauty of where Cleveland is at in a lot of ways. I think number one, they have a roster that I think you obviously have top line talent you really like. But it's also, I think, malleable talent. I think Garland is pretty versatile. I think Mobley is pretty versatile. I think Allen is a specialist in a specific way, but he's really good at what he does in that way, right? There's also just like different ways. If you can find talent that fits you can use those guys in different ways. And if maybe it's not the way you necessarily, how they feel about that is a different question. But I think where Cleveland is at, they could push this in different directions. And I wonder if they look at this class and they look at drafting here and what they're going to do the next couple of months, and it'll tell us something about what they feel about how they're building. Look, I mean, Colin Sexton this summer is up for an extension. Okoro, who I would probably say is the worst pick of the Kobe Altman era since 2018. And I'm an Okoro guy. That is a situation where, you know, what they do with him in a year will be interesting too. It's like, I think this is just like an interesting time to have a pick, because I think if everything goes to plan, this probably is also the last time they pick in the top 14. And like their 2023 pick will now probably go to Indiana. Maybe they'll trade some other future picks if they get aggressive this summer. But I think if you're them, you're hoping this is the last time you're picking this high. And what they potentially do with that is kind of interesting to me.
Yeah, again, I mean, they're kind of playing with house money over there. And yeah, it's Sexton or Okoro. And God, do you know how many teams would kill to have the draft record for the last 4 years? The Cleveland Cavaliers have had, 'cause they've been almost perfect when you speaking relatively, as in no busts. You could pull out some of the best resumes of drafting, and nobody comes close in the last 4 years of what Cleveland's done. So they're playing with house money, and I'm really interested to see what they do. Kind of quick question for you, actually, just turn the tables. Do you think they'll go best player available or forfeit?
I have a hard time reading that because They play things, I think, very close to the vest. I know that they scouted Branham a lot. I know that they've scouted the two guys we're talking about today. I tend to think that they will probably try to like toe the line a little bit, just because I think they feel like they have I feel like and I think rightfully so, they look at Garland and Mobley and say, we have our two like lead guys. Like we have our two super duper stars. But at the same time, if like someone if I don't even know if he could contribute in year one, but if for some reason like Shaden Sharp failed to them for whatever reason, that's an easy pick to me. Like I think you could make an argument that like Dyson Daniels makes sense to them, and he's a guy that could have some development, in front of him, right? Like, and what he exactly is unclear. And even Branham, like you could look at him and say, hey, if they feel he's the best guy on the board at 14 for whatever reason, you could argue like his skill set is not even like perfect. Like the guy we're going to talk about in the next segment, Johnny Davis, if they love him, that's not his numbers don't suggest a guy that is like perfect for what they kind of need. Like it's what makes like guys like Achai and Kendall Brown, like those guys scream like guys who can shoot, guys who can play, can be a wing. And then there's other guys where I think that are very much in play that don't scream that. And I think it could go either way right now. I will be curious to see what and if kind of comes out around the lottery and what we kind of see. I wouldn't even be surprised if they're also shopping this pick to some degree, because I could see them saying, look, we can draft someone and that would be nice. And I kind of think financially that makes sense, which is the other part of this. But I think you get to the draft and say, okay, maybe there's a trade that manifests at that time. And I will be curious. I think we will actually learn a lot about their philosophy in a lot of ways with this pick. All right, after the break, we're going to talk first about Johnny Davis, the Wisconsin guard. But first, going to tell everyone about Built Bar. Richard, do you have a favorite Built Bar flavor?
Man, I love the cookies and cream. It's so basic, but I'm such a sucker for it.
No, it's so good. Look, Built Bars are great. They're the best things for us out there. I'm going to have a cookies and cream when we finish recording this, but covered in 100% real chocolate, including the puffs. Go to built.com, check out the macros chart. You're going to be blown away. They're high protein, low calorie, high fiber, and low carb. Most Built Bars contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 grams of net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Compare that to a candy bar, which usually has around 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. You have great flavors. Cookies and cream, a favorite here of Richard and of me and of Evan. Mint brownie, coconut almond. They have peanut butter brownie. Can't really go wrong. And they're all delicious with new flavors coming out all the time. If they think a flavor might be good, they're going to make it, and it's going to be delicious and good for you. So go to built.com, use the promo code LOCK15 and get 15% off your order. Again, the promo code is LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. All right, back here with Richard Stayman at Mavs Draft on Twitter from the Locked On NBA Draft Podcast. Richard, Johnny Davis. Okay, for listeners that don't know, 6'5", 196-pound guard from Wisconsin. Played 2 years for the Badgers. Last year, averaged 19.7 points, 2.1 assists, shot 42.7% from the field, and 30.6% from three. He made a big leap statistically from year 1 to year 2. Was the Big Ten Player of the Year last year, and a consensus All-American. From what I could tell, like was off draft boards really after his freshman year, and now it seems like a surefire lottery pick. You have him 15. This was when Evan and I were planning this episode. This was the guy he wanted to make sure we talked about as we kind of kick off this draft process for us. So, what do you make of Johnny Davis?
Yeah, he's an interesting guy. I hadn't really heard of him until he went on to the FIBA U19 team that featured Chet Holmgren, Patrick Baldwin, Mike Miles, a bunch of college stars that in first round picks for this draft class. And Johnny Davis showed off his shooting, and he used that stage to develop his overall game. He became, obviously, I want to say he was the Big Ten Player of the Year. Was that right? I can't remember. Yeah. And he was all Big Ten, consensus All-American, like all the awards he raked as a sophomore. The main area is like he just became a good ball handler, scorer, just created his own shot. He was a one-man show at Wisconsin. What you're getting with him is you're getting a high IQ player that can score the ball, play defense, and has a high motor, and just doesn't make a ton of mistakes. To kind of just give an opposite view, he does struggle to get a shot off at times. It's been only a few times in the season, but when he didn't get it off, he looked pretty rough. The question really becomes, is he an on-ball primary scorer, or is he an off-ball guy who he feeds off of a primary ball handler a little bit better?
What would you make of his fit in Cleveland as, maybe not probably a guy that's like a bench guard, at least to start his career?
Yeah, I think he would probably come off the bench. I'm trying to think of the roster construction with having him of what his
you next year you'd roll in next year with guard wise. It'd be Garland, Sexton pending a contract, Karis LeVert, Okoro's nominally a guard wing, like, and then you kind of from there it's like, okay, like, are you going to re-sign Ricky Rubio this summer or go get another veteran point guard? You have Lamar Stevens who's kind of playing guard and wing minutes as well. Jetty Osman who could be traded this summer is there as well. There's like I think room to upgrade at the guard. The skill set is, I think, what's interesting because if it's a guy who's got the size of this, like if you tell me that you're going to bet and developing a guy who can't necessarily get off his own shot as cleanly as possible, the Cavs kind of feel like a team that could like make work with that to some degree. But if they feel like they want some shot creating upside, then that would maybe factor into this to some degree.
Yeah, and I forgot about Karis LeVert being traded there for a second, so I knew I was missing somebody.
A lot of people, didn't go great.
Yeah, it definitely makes it easier if Johnny Davis was drafted and like even it's like a 60% outcome of his ceiling. He probably makes Karis LeVert a little bit more expendable. So I think that's a big piece that you brought up, like the roster upgrades that he could offer. I mean, Windler's been a little bit disappointing to say the least. Like obviously he's not the same role, but I do think that he could add a lot. I think he would probably take pressure off of Garland. I mean, the same way they thought Karis LeVert would, and that'd be on both ends, really. I think when you look at what Johnny Davis does, like obviously we know he's a scorer. He can get his shots and everything, but something that's underrated about him is just he plays so hard all the time, and it translates on defense. Like even though he's not the most skilled defender, he stays in place because of that motor. So I think he fits everything with Cleveland, what they're doing, just talking through what I just said. So I've suddenly convinced myself.
So what about his shot? Because I think if I'm looking at this and I'm playing, I'm picking at this, I look at a guy who shot 30.6% from three and I say, okay, that's a little concerning. The Cavs are a team that I think needs spacers. They need guys that can stretch the floor a little bit. It's one of the limits of Okoro. It's the reason they miss Sexton. It's one of the big hinge things of Mobley right now, right? Like if Mobley develops a shot, it unlocks a lot. He doesn't have to be great, but like it would help if he could. So when you look at his shooting profile, is he a guy that could become like even an average NBA shooter? Like is that in the cards for Davis if things break correctly?
Yes, very much so. I think it's really interesting if you take out the postseason, the one conference tournament game and the two NCAA tournament games where he shot a combined 4 of 22 from three. His 3-point percentage goes up to 33.3%. So whatever that's worth, I know it's still not great. I think that is an improvement, but more importantly, I look at free throw percentage with guys that have clearly good form, good touch. He's at 79%. That's really good. Generally 78, 77.5 is like the number you want to be at if you're a guard or wing. And he cleared that. So I have a lot of promise there with that. And then also his form is just really nice and he gets his shot off well. Like the release is clean. The one concern I do have, and one other thing also, is that he was a one-man show, so you have to take that into some context there, of course. But my main concern for him, and if you're wanting to find one game of where this happened, the Penn State game where it was his first single-digit scoring game of the year, he could not get off a single shot. And Penn State isn't that great of a defense. So that really concerned me. And then he was predictable behind screens, and they figured him out. So I just worry about, can he be less predictable around screens to get his shots off in the NBA?
Yeah, I think that'll be interesting. I think he'd be a guy that maybe if you go this way and maybe they identify, okay, we want a big guard, a bigger two guard to kind of play with our guys. Maybe there's a way that works because Darius is going to handle the burden of that to some degree, and like he can develop, and like maybe that there's a way that you can kind of coax some of this out of him over time. How would you, if the Cavs, let's say, end up taking him at 14? Let's just kind of yes or no. Is that a reasonable pick at 14?
I think it is. I think, a lot of people had him top 10. I'm just a little bit hesitant because of those two things of, being a one-man show, maybe it was a little bit inflated. And then also, can he score without screens? So I'm a little bit lower on him than most, but I think when you put him in a right situation, kind of like Cleveland, where they have Darius Garland to do a lot of the dirty work for him as a creator, for example, I think he goes to a good situation in Cleveland.
Yeah. All right. After the break, we're going to turn our attention to Kansas's Ochai Agbaji, a prospect who fits the 3-and-D profile, a little bit older, also has said he has interest in playing for the Cavs, whatever that means. But first, going to tell everyone about our friends at BetOnline. BetOnline is the #1 source for all your betting and stats and sports needs this season and all seasons. Find all of the latest sports developments, league reviews, news, and this year's basketball playoffs and the start of the Major League Baseball season. Be sure to check out BetOnline for the latest odds on each and every playoff game. BetOnline is your continued source for sports wagering information, from live betting to the playoffs to esports and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. For example, in the NBA draft world, Jabari Smith from Auburn is currently their favorite to be picked number 1 overall at -125. Gonzaga's Chet Holmgren is +215. And Duke's Paolo Banchero is +325. That's BetOnline. That's where the game starts. Richard, when you hear those numbers on BetOnline, do you have if you had a number one pick, which one of those guys would you take?
I think it's Jabari. I'm going with the odds makers too, and that's why I have number 1 on my board.
Yeah, interesting. I see you have Chet at 4. That's interesting. We'll have to talk about that off air, because the Cavs will probably not be in a consideration to take Chet. But all right, we're back. We're going to talk now about Ochai Agbaji from Kansas. Look, I want to just start with this, because I think this is part of the discourse on this, and whether that's fair or not is I will leave that to the listeners and the viewers. Is there a significant downside, or any downside you would consider, in picking someone like him, who is 22 as a 4-year player, in the lottery, even if it is the back end of the lottery? Is there something that counts against him because he's a little bit of an older prospect and compared to these other guys?
I don't think the age should matter that much. I mean, let's learn from the mistakes we've made as NBA, both fans and NBA teams, mostly NBA teams, but they messed up by putting Desmond Bane as the 30th pick. Obviously a little bit different from Agbaji, because the wingspan differences are a lot, but Desmond Bane was the best shooter in that class. There was some debate, and he is a top 5 player from that draft. I think the best shooter in the draft that has a real role and can do other things is an automatic lottery prospect. Like, than just a redraft value, those guys return way better value than the draft slot most of the time.
So he comes in after being, again, a 4-year player at Kansas, won a national title, was the most outstanding player in the Final Four, shot 40.7% from 3, 8.8 points, 5.1 rebounds per game. It seems like watching him, it seems like looking at his numbers and diving into him, it really seems like this is like a 3-and-D guy. And I think if you're Cleveland and you look at if that is the skill set he is, and maybe it's not linearly going to be exactly what he is, there's always some changes when guys transition for whatever reason. This seems like a guy that on paper would like fill the most obvious hole on the Cavs roster, and it's also the thing that like every NBA team wants. So is that what he is? Is he like a plug and play 3-and-D guy to some degree?
Yeah, I think in the regular season you might see some 3-and-D. I would be hesitant to use that label on him, just because I think the defense is very exposable. He's more of a tools 3-and-D guy, where he's got the length and athleticism and everything, but he needs to be taught how to play better team defense to really maximize that end. But as a plug-and-play shooter, without a doubt, offensively, his entire game translates up to the NBA. So
you mentioned in your scouting report that his team defense is questionable. Can you explain what that means, as opposed to being like a one-on-one defender, just for the viewers that maybe are thinking, okay, like he looks a good defender, has good steal rates or whatever. Like what is it about his team defense that leaves you a little bit cold?
Sure. Yeah. So pretty much when I say team defense, it's the rotations. It's if you get beat off your man, what do you do next kind of thing, where do you just kind of sit like James Harden in the dust? Like, he's not a good team defender. Do you sit in the dust and just go, oh, well, I got blown by, and then kind of just move on to the next thing? Or do you rotate, find whoever helped rotate down? Do you take their man? Kind of figuring out the schemes and going along with what happens if it doesn't go to plan. How can you recover? Things like that. That's generally what it means by team defense, and off-ball defense as well, just preventing things from happening on ball. So as for his team defense, it's just the decision-making. He kind of just doesn't know where to go, is kind of what I see whenever he gets blown by, and he is a little bit prone to getting blown by as well, which is alarming because he's so athletic, but he just doesn't know how to use his tools just yet.
So does it feel like not the same body type, but does it kind of feel like he would fit the like Robert Covington profile of like has a reputation as like a really good defender, but is clearly better off ball and is a pest off ball? Or sorry, let me flip that. More of like a point of attack guy than an off ball guy is. So not Robert Covington, more like Isaac Okoro in some ways.
Yeah. I'd say he's better on ball than off ball.
yeah, my brain is broken as if you get into like year 3 of the pandemic. So my brain just misconfused what Robert Covington is in my head, and then I caught myself. What is he on the offensive end, and how has that changed as we've seen more of him after? I mean, there's 4 years of tape on him, which is a little obviously unusual for a lottery pick. I mean, like I would love to like talk to an NBA scout who like has to do. Who's like who gets assigned his list of guys, and it's like, okay, you have Shaedon Sharpe and you have this guy. Like you have these two guys at the extreme opposite spectrum of how much tape you have really available to you. So like, how has he grown up, and like, was this a guy that like even a year ago would have been in the conversation to be a first round pick?
Yeah, Ochai was a guy who last year when he was in the combine, I never saw him above like the 30th pick at best. There's a lot of people saying like, I gamble on the tools kind of thing, and I had him in the 30s. This year, it's a lot different. Like just coming back and being the first option while also being more efficient really is what won me over. But just talking about the offense, I mean, his athleticism, first of all, it starts with that. The athleticism is out of this world. I've seen him now 3 times in person at TCU, and man, every time I get there early, he is the most fun college athlete I've seen pregame because he'll do between the legs dunks where he's getting his head even with the rim. I posted a couple videos of it. It's ridiculous. So he's really fun as an athlete, and he knows how to use that as a cutter and a finisher. I think in the NBA, you'll see it more as a finisher on ball, like a slasher, than he got to show in college because the paint is so crowded in college. But then it goes to the jump shooting. His ability to come off screens is absolutely perfect. It's just perfection in every way. There's no dip in his shot. It's super quick from top to bottom. It just, everything looks good. The form is nice. He gets it off clean. He can shoot over defenders. All of that. So I think he's kind of an analytical darling where he'll probably be a really good finisher. You won't see a lot of mid-range, and then he's going to be lights out from 3.
Can he defend up?
Probably not.
Okay. That to me is, if I'm Cleveland, is something that I think I am considering in this draft, because I've like looked at Okoro, and he's best as a point of attack guy, can defend up a little bit because he's very strong, but like isn't going to defend the 3-4 types. They're missing. I think they are kind of clearly missing that, like, and look, these guys are a premium for a reason, but like I've watched, again, Grant Williams play for Boston in the playoffs, and it's like that kind of guy who can defend up, defend down a little bit, has strength to, is like something I'm considering. But it also doesn't seem like there's necessarily a guy into this range as we understand the board right now that necessarily like fits that. So like if you came away with this guy, or you came away with, maybe Eason, who we talked about at the top, is maybe that. But like if you came with Kendall Brown or some of these other guys, or Johnny Davis, like that to me seems like a reasonable thing to do, because you also do have Evan Mobley and Jared Allen to build your defense with. Like that almost is like, I think, a desirable skill set, that Grant Williams prototype. At the same time, like maybe you don't have to like go out of your way to try to find it, because you have these 2 like freaks at the back end of your defense. Like with those 2 guys, you had and Mobley was a rookie last year, and Allen's like 23. Like they had a top 10 defense for depending on what metric you're looking at.
Yeah, and also it's like I think this is the first year that Cleveland has had a good defense since before LeBron, like excluding the LeBron James years.
Well, those defenses were only good in the playoffs when they decided they had to try. So
true, but I mean, like to find a pre-2003 good Cavs defense, you have to go back before you and I were born, and probably half the listeners were born. So yes, that's really impressive. I think Agbaji, he won't hurt it, but he definitely won't help it.
Okay, so I think the answer is a yes, based on talking to you privately and everything. But Agbaji would be a reasonable pick at 14.
Absolutely.
Okay, would you say him or Davis? You have Agbaji higher on the board, but if you're Cleveland, does one of them fit better to you?
I have them separated by 3 spots, I think.
Okay.
Man, you can never have enough shooters. I mean, you can never, when you have a team like Cleveland has, getting the best shooter in the draft. Man, that's tough to turn down, or at least first round shooter. That's tough. But if both translate, here's how I'll answer this. If both translate, you get Johnny Davis. If everyone hits their 100% outcome and looks just as good, whatever, it's Johnny Davis. If it's a medium outcome, say 60% give or take, you take Ochai Agbaji. Low end, you take Ochai. So it depends what you're looking for.
Okay, I think that's a fair answer. Richard, give everyone the plug about what you guys are doing over on the Locked On NBA Draft Unit, and all the work you're doing to get people, idiots like me who are crash coursing into the draft, prepared for the NBA draft.
Hey, no, it's actually really exciting. We actually just rebranded very recently. We moved over to, we took over for Chad Ford. There's about 4 of us. The real person who took over is Rafael Barlow, but he's kind enough to keep us on board. And I'm on every Tuesday, but Locked On NBA Big Board is the show. So you won't see anything pop up on Locked On NBA Draft anymore. But the Big Board is where everything's happening. We're going to have some player interviews. We're doing a lot of just fun exercises for the draft, scouting report, all of it. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, if you want to get smarter for the draft, in addition to listening to Locked On Cavs, go check out the NBA Big Board. Check out the Substack Raphael's doing as well. Check out MavsDraft.com. Check out the community mocks that Richard was kind enough to put me in and have draft for the Cavs. Did you like my Agbaji Wendell Moore haul?
Dude, it was nice. You had a good tandem there.
I was just like, give me the wings. I have a clear like need here. And then, you ended up picking the UDFAs for me, but the one I was going to do just for humor, and I know he's really fallen. I was just going to be like, can I just have Isaiah Mobley just for tampering purposes?
Oh no, that's like Isaiah probably won't get drafted, and that's probably where he ends up.
What happened there? Just as a quick like Mobley related note, I saw him as like a lottery guy, like not a lottery guy, but like a first round guy, like early in the year. What happened?
Yeah, so I never really saw him as a first round guy personally. There was that hype though. There definitely was. People expected him to take a big jump. He just didn't. He's a classic tweener. He's a power forward with this may shock you, ridiculously long arms. Might have a longer wingspan relative to his body than Evan Mobley. But the problem is he's not a consistent shooter, and the volume uptick just didn't happen. He's a very good passer though. So and good defender too. I just don't know how valuable that is at power forward when you can't shoot. So he's a good bet, like especially with Evan there. If you wanted to put him on the 2-way, I think that would be an elite deal.
Cleveland, like him and Taco Fall in the G League, just sounds like an absolute like annoying pest thing to play with. If the Charge want to do that next year, for me that just sounds like a good time more than anything else, and just good relationship building. Like the NBA has done that. I mean, J.R. Smith got his brother signed to the Knicks, so like if J.R. Smith can get Chris Smith signed to the Westchester Knicks, I think Evan Mobley can get his brother to the Cleveland Charge on UDFA. Richard, thanks so much for coming on. We're gonna have you back on. I'm gonna ask you now on the spot. I'm gonna let you pick. Evan and I pick this time. Is there a prospect that you want to make sure we talk about next time we do this?
Oh man, yes.
Give me a name, and I'll put it down now.
Let's do Nikola Jovic.
Okay, I'm in on this. He's 10 on your board. I believe, I'd have to check the DM, but I believe when I reached out to you about like what guy should I start scouting, he was the first name you mentioned. So yeah, we'll do Nikola Jovic next time. That's going to be fun. Check out that. We'll be back on Monday. And speaking of Mobley's, next week we're going to kick off the Evan Mobley season in review with Karen Locked On Cavs. I hope you guys tune in for that. Thanks again for listening. Be well. Thanks again to Richard, and have a great weekend. And weirdly, we did this this episode is coming out the same day the NFL draft started. Frankly, I think the NBA draft's more fun. So hope you guys enjoyed. Talk to you soon.